And hello again. And this video will focus on marketing research. And we'll do two primary things in this video. We will define what is meant by marketing research, and then we will discuss the marketing research process. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to define marketing research. I'm going to put on my handy dandy glasses so I can read a definition, not the definition. There's multiple definitions of marketing research, but the one that I have used for a number of years, it refers to a systematic design, collection, analysis, and reporting of data relevant to a situation facing an organization. So again, the systematic design, collection, analysis, and reporting of data relevant to a situation facing an organization. So there's a lot of stuff going on there. You're designing, you're collecting, you're analyzing, and reporting data, and we'll talk about that, those things in more detail when we look at the marketing research process. One of the key things about marketing research is to understand that it's meant to provide information to help managers make decisions, and the devil is in the details. Again, as we are going to find out throughout the course, some things sound really simple. I mean, how hard can it be to provide information to help managers make decisions? Well, it can be really hard because one thing is in marketing research is like a really sexy aspect of marketing. And a lot of people want to do marketing research, and a lot of people want to do some of the sexier aspects of marketing research, and that's all well and good, but you have to understand that marketing research, if it's done well, is really time consuming and can be extremely expensive. And if the purpose of marketing research is not to provide information to help managers make decisions, then there's a lot of potential waste that can occur. And, I can give you an example. It's going to sound like I'm bashing John Carroll, but it's a John Carroll related example. There were a number of years ago, the university decided, it was about 15 years ago actually, the university decided that it wasn't doing a very good job of marketing itself. So the president at the time, a person named Father Glenn, Ed Glenn, who passed away within probably the past year, God rest his soul, Father Glenn decided to put together a university marketing committee. And one of the wise things that Father Glenn did was he put a couple of marketing professors, myself included, on the university marketing committee. And we soon realized that what we needed to do was well beyond the capabilities of the people on the committee. So the university hired a really well-known branding company to basically do a really in-depth market research study of John Carroll University. And the upshot of the whole thing is that the university spent between $150,000 and $200,000 to pay this company, and this company has sterling credentials. And just to give you an example, if you've ever heard of the MasterCard Priceless campaign, this is a company that helped MasterCard come up with that particular campaign. This is also the company that helped Intel come up with the Intel Inside campaign. So this is like a really, really good company. Anyway, the company does its marketing research. It prepares its report. The university pays them between $150,000 and $200,000, and some of the higher ups at the university decided that they didn't like what the report said. So the report, it's a really pretty report. It sits on a shelf and collects dust. And the university has never done anything with the information in there because the university, some of the people, the higher administration at the university, didn't like what it said. So again, my point is not to be bitter about the whole thing. I actually thought that the report was really well done. It identified a lot of issues. It offered some really interesting suggestions. But the point is that if you're going to spend $150,000, $200,000, and you're just going to dismiss the results because you don't like them, then why are you doing marketing research in the first place? Because somebody's got to pay for that, expense for marketing research. So, again, marketing research, it sounds real, it's real sexy in terms of what it is. The purpose is to provide information for managers to make decisions, but if you're just going to ignore the information that's been collected, why do it in the first place? You save yourself a lot of aggravation, save yourself a lot of time, save yourself a lot of money. All right, so there's my first thing on market research. So we're going to talk about a marketing research process, and this process is important because while the process doesn't guarantee success, it should reduce or it should improve the chances for being successful. It doesn't guarantee success, but should improve the chances for being successful. And so it's a sequential process, and the first step or phase in the process is to define the problem. And that seems like you say, oh my God, I am paying $700 a credit hour for this bozo Murphy to tell me that the first step in the marketing research problem is to define, or excuse me, the marketing research process is to define the problem. Like, no kidding. Well, again, devil's in the details, because everything starts with the problem definition. Because if you misdefine the problem, you can do all the other steps that we're talking about. You can do them really well. But if you've misdefined the problem, then what you come up with is essentially going to be worthless. You say, ooh, hadn't thought about that. And the example that I like to use is, symptom, problem. So a company might say, our problem is we're losing money. That's not a problem. That's a symptom. Okay? It's a symptom because you can ask the question, why? Why are we losing money? Well, okay, expenses are greater than revenues. Okay, why are expenses greater than revenues? And so you get a sense for, it's the old thing like you've heard probably with medical professionals. The doctor that treats the symptoms, right? The problem still exists, and so it becomes really important to define the problem, because if the problem is poorly defined or misdefined, then everything else that follows, no matter how well you do it, you're not going to address the problem. You're not going to provide the proper information to a manager to help a manager make a decision. So assuming that we've defined the problem, all right, the next step is to develop the research plan. And in this thing, what you're doing is you're trying to figure out, okay, we've figured out what the problem is. What kind of data are we going to need to address the problem, and how are we going to collect the data? And so it's kind of a prescriptive thing of, okay, now we figured out what the problem is, exactly what kind of data we need, how are we going to collect it. So then the next phase after that is data collection. And data collection involves a couple of things. One thing you do is you want to look at secondary data, which is defined as data that already exists and data that have been collected for some other purpose. Now, a lot of times what happens, quite honestly, is that, marketing research in and of itself is sexy. Okay? I keep on saying that. Just trust me, it is. Secondary data is not sexy, or secondary data are not sexy. Primary data, now that's sexy, right? Because you're actually going out and primary data, which is data specifically collected to address the problem at hand. That's really sexy because it allows you to use a lot of different data collection tools and techniques. So now we're ramping up the sexy meter. But a potential problem is that if somebody were to ask you, for example, how many people are there in Cuyahoga County, right, which is the county that John Carroll is located in, you could do primary research to find that information out, but hell, it already exists, right? So one of the things that when you're thinking about data collection, one of the things that organizations should first do is they should look at the secondary data, in part because secondary data already exists. You can access the secondary data relatively quickly, particularly now with advances in technology. Secondary data tend to be cheaper than collecting primary data. So there's a lot of potential advantages to secondary data. And the secondary data, oh boy, the secondary data might be sufficient. You might be able to find, right, the answer or the answers to your problems in the secondary data, right? And there's different kinds of secondary data. There's internal secondary data, which is data internal to a firm, right? And there's external secondary data, and it's data that's from outside the firm. There's different kinds of secondary data. There's public secondary data. That's data that you don't have to pay for. There's also proprietary secondary data, which are data that you have to pay for. So again, there's the kind of the free stuff, like the U.S. government. The U.S. government does a census every 10 years. There's a treasure trove of information in the U.S. government census, right? You don't have to pay for that. But there are organizations out there that have combined kind of a lot of different secondary data, and they've put it into a package that is much richer than just the information that's provided by the government census. But you would have to pay for that data. And again, now we're getting into the cost issue. So we've talked a little bit about secondary data, and then primary data again is data that's specifically collected to address the problem at hand. And again, that's sexy kind of stuff. Okay, trust me. I've done a number of primary data collection, and it's a hell of a lot better and a hell of a lot more fun than looking at secondary data. Trust me. The question is which primary data collection method should we use? And that, again, when we're talking about developing the research plan, right, what kind of data are needed to address the problem, how you're going to collect it. And so the primary data, the kind of the way that you collect the primary data is often going to be or should be driven by the problem that you're looking to solve. So let me ask you a question. Okay, this is always a good one. I like this one. So how much shampoo do you use? You go, that's a really good question. You say, who cares? Well, if you're a Procter & Gamble who makes a lot of shampoos, or you're a Colgate-Palmolive who makes shampoos, you're curious. You would like to know, right? How much shampoo does a person use when a person shampoos their hair? Because, knowing that could give you ideas on, the kind of the package size. Do you need bigger volume? Do you need lesser volume? Right? I mean, and so you say, well, how would we collect that information? Well, most obvious way to collect it would be observation. But let me ask you a question. How exactly are you going to observe people shampooing their hair? You go, well, we can do it. See where I'm going, right? Put a webcam in a shower. Why not? You say, oh, man, I'm starting to see what some of the problem with marketing research can be. So observation is a method, right? Sometimes observation isn't appropriate. Okay, think about it. So you say, well, let's do a survey. Okay, so how much shampoo do you use? Right, there's a question. Is it an open-ended question, or is it a closed-ended question? You say, oh, never thought about that, right? The closed-ended questions are the wonderful, like, multiple choice kinds of things, right, that you have, right? Less than an ounce, between an ounce and 2 ounces, right? That kind of thing. Open-ended question is, how much shampoo do you use, right? Write an answer in, okay? You go, wow. So you can start to see, and then there's a third type. Okay, so we've talked about observation as a type, as a way to collect primary data. There's also survey research, right? And there's all sorts of issues in survey research. I mean, my question of, how much shampoo do you use? That's a terrible question, right? How much shampoo do I use in a month, in a week, in a day? Each time I shampoo my hair, so I mean, there's all sorts of, you say, oh, I see why, I'm starting to see why primary research is so sexy, because I mean, there's really a lot of stuff that you need to know, and a good market researcher will really be able to show off a lot of his or her knowledge, in how questions are developed or how the observation is done, and et cetera. There's a third type of primary data collection techniques. Experiment, not used as much in marketing. You tend to think of experiments as being used much more to collect primary data in the sciences, but it can be used in marketing, but it's not really used that much in marketing. So you go, okay, so we've defined the problem, we've developed a research plan, we've collected our data. Well, then you have to analyze and interpret the data. And one of the things that often happens here is that people haven't thought about things ahead of time, and I see this a lot in some of the academic papers that I review for various academic journals. People have designed a survey, they've collected data, and they're using statistical techniques that aren't appropriate to the type of data that's been collected. So you might remember from statistics, you've got nominal data and ordinal data and interval data and ratio level data. And each one of those types of data has statistics that are appropriate to them. So, the more sophisticated the statistical technique that you're going to use to analyze the data, the better the data need to be. So you're not going to be doing multiple regression, or you shouldn't do multiple regression analysis if you have, let's say, nominal or ordinal data. I've seen people try to do it. It's not pretty because you're violating a lot of conditions that need to be met in order to order to analyze the data. And again, if you're misapplying statistics, that can kind of skew the results. And again, when you think about what's the purpose of marketing research, right, to provide information to help marketers make decisions, you could be creating some real problems because you've analyzed data incorrectly, right? You've applied incorrect statistical techniques to data, right? So we analyze and interpret the data. And then the final stage of the marketing research process involves writing the report and implementing the findings. And we'll talk about the first part more so than the second, and the writing of the report. And the thing that I want to stress here is that you can do a great job, okay, up until this point. Right? You can have defined the problem really well. You can have developed a really solid research plan. You've done a great job at data collection. You've done a great job at data analysis, and then you blow it because you write a horrible report. And he said, well, how can you write a horrible report? Well, let me give you an example from a long time ago. It was when I was in the doctoral program at the University of Maryland. And there was a trucking company that no longer exists. They called up the business school at the University of Maryland and said, hey, we want to know where to put our truck terminals. So the transportation faculty in the College of Business and some doctoral students, myself included, we worked with this trucking company to develop a model that would help them figure out where to put their truck terminals. And so we had to present the final report, right? So we did the whole thing. We defined the problem. We developed a research plan. We relied primarily on secondary data. We did all sorts of sophisticated data analysis, and then we wrote the report. Well, I didn't write. I kind of contributed to the report. There was, the lead professor wrote the report. So he writes this report, and it reads like an academic report. And the problem with that is we're presenting this to the president of the company, we're presenting to the vice president of operations, the vice president of sales, the vice president of marketing. These are truckers. They have absolutely no clue about things like stepwise multiple regression. And they have no clues about F ratios for regression equations and the beta, the T values of the beta coefficients and stuff like that. This was an unmitigated disaster. Right? All they wanted, think about this. When you write the report should address the problem that you defined in the first place, right? So all this company wanted to do, where do we put our truck terminals? Should we put a truck terminal in Roanoke, Virginia, or should we put it in Richmond, Virginia? Should we put it in Charlotte, North Carolina? Should we put it in Raleigh, North Carolina? No. We're going on about F ratios and R squareds and the whole ball of wax that you would do if you were writing an academic report. So the key thing is again, like I said earlier on, you can do everything well, but if you blow something at a particular step, you're not going to be able to provide information to managers to help them make decisions.